So as long as it's not contradictory to Islamic law completely, like if it's something that where it's a gray area where, like if the U.S. had said, if the American law was you could not get married at all, then we would have problems. But if it's something that is something extra, that is not, that's not as, it's not, help me out, Benita? Please help me out, Benita. Benita McGee, come on in.
Okay.
Here.
There were a couple of questions that I'll respond to just really quickly and then hand it back off to Lubabah. Your question was not about how Islamic law bumps up against U.S. law. That's an easy answer. You follow the law of the land. Okay. What we're talking about really, you're asking about a cultural question, which goes, rivers run deeper. People say, of course we don't do that, and then they go do it. So what that requires a different level of education, enforcement of, this is U.S. Honor killing is not acceptable in U.S. law, it's not acceptable in Sharia law, it's not acceptable in Islamic law. It's just, so what we as advocates is to reach and educate communities. If change, and that just takes more time, but the answer is just continued enforcement. And one way of doing that is another way of doing that is, people have different ranges of acculturation. So you have people who are more entrenched in certain cultural things, the less acculturated they are. So if you're newer, you're still going to follow some of the ways that you're used to, and you find that second generation do less actively, but may be pressured into continuing certain cultural norms that they realize is not healthy, but because of the generational pressure or the relationship of parent family pressure may be perpetuated. So when you're looking at who are we targeting, looking at second and third generation as allies to start combating certain cultural norms and saying this is not acceptable is a good way of starting to build bridges that then shift norms from their parents and also along those trends. But in terms of law, it's very simple. You got to follow the law of the land. You can't kill people no matter what your doesn't matter. Now, with regard to influence of religion and culture and back and forth, I think sometimes people go one way, and it doesn't go one way. It's influence, and it's both ways. The point that I think Lubabah was getting to in response to the lady's question here was that religion, that I'll take an example of Pakistan. Pakistanis, but they have been, there's been tradition for centuries, very, very, very long time. And in the course of time, they've gotten fuzzy as to what is religiously based. And we talked about religion, right? Quran and Sunnah, the saying and doings of the Prophet, okay, that's the key source. What happens is over time, people say, well, the community does this, and we keep doing it. It's Islam, but it's okay. And once you have the allowance to as a Muslim community, then it starts to change. Then as we talked about here, things that have not become acceptable in that particular culture have now been validated by misuse and misuse of the faith. And then you start the vicious cycle of self-fulfilling prophecy, still challenged. But at the end of the day, for you as and whatnot, your client may not be able to delineate clearly between religion and culture. So it's more to understand that there are different frameworks happening in the person that you are dealing with. That person may not see a line at all. This is what we do, this is how we do it. Like if you for a Pakistan, you dress modest, they're not going to see. That because it is for them, the culture and the faith has become the way. So it was just more understanding that there's frameworks happening, and at the end of the day, as your, you meet them where they are. You don't have, at the end of the day, you don't have to them that this is real religious versus culture. Just know what they are. And knowing that there are clear religious dictates, very tranquil and happy is enough for you to know. You don't have to get into, I'm supposed to serve him tea, and if I don't serve tea, just understanding enough of it to know where the flags are and know where to seek a and helping addressing cultural norms that can be problematic for your advocacy. Does that make sense? Okay.
You have more questions?
No, these are for you. Okay, yes.
Well, you mentioned Sharia law.
Mm-hmm.
Islam law. Can you differentiate it for us?
I
do. The pejorative on the TV and the radio is
yes, and they use it in it's coming to get you. And it's not that deep. It's not like that at all. If you ask the average Muslim where they live under Sharia, probably say, why? Not because they think, because their understanding of Sharia law is different than the majority of people who have been educated via certain media sources or other means. Sharia has some core rules built around do no harm, justice, and some other elements that if someone told you these were the principles by which they tell you were Sharia law, you probably agree. The problem is, and when it comes into, we're dealing with undercurrent post 9/11 age of Sharia, of things are still suspect, and even if you have who's are and telling you things, really still wrong with them. Something's still quite wrong, or if that person is giving you this smile and telling you I'm not a person, they really are, they're just not. So you have this undercurrent of no matter how much education from media sources, the so-called experts, which is really a I don't know any realm in which you can have people being called experts in Islam. It's embarrassing. But that's not the point. The point is that Sharia and interchangeably, and we don't have to all the time Sharia, but it's not, for many of us, it's not considered a thing or problematic thing. I can tell you for a fact, though, that there is there's no in the there's no country right now that really implements Sharia.
But they try to have Sharia courts.
Well, Sharia court, what they usually do for Sharia courts is dealing with family law. Similar, and what the goal is, and again, it made it to a very scary thing, but it's a lot of Orthodox Jewish have courts operate on Orthodox Jewish law, and they're allowed to operate in that way, which is different. I mean, so I think that if any of how some Jewish communities incorporated certain religious laws into their daily operation, so we want to do that. It takes on a different context and meaning and response when you say Sharia, when you say Islamic law. Okay? All right.
Thank you, Benita. Next, I will quickly just, sorry. Sorry about that. I am going to quickly just go into community roadblocks and resources, challenges faced by the Muslim communities, imams, leaders, and then go into some of the challenges that U.S. service providers, advocates might have. And I'm going to try and keep it under like 5-6 minutes so that you guys can have, if you guys have any more questions, and then we'll do our closing evaluations and all of that. So like I had said before, a lot of the leadership in the Muslim community has little to no training in DV. They may not recognize the signs of DV. They may send women back into unsafe situations. They may blame the victim and further traumatize them, or they may attempt couples therapy in a way that's not very effective. There's very limited resources, like Benita told you guys earlier. There's a handful of DV organizations in the US, handful of shelters, there's limited educational materials. And Muslims and other faith-based people often mistrust mainstream service because of what they've heard, because of what they've seen. And a lot of it is things that they've not actually seen, things that they've heard from 3-4 times removed. And so that's something to keep in mind. Let's see, some of the roadblocks that service providers might have, or some cultural challenges that agree are their assumptions that different does not equal abusive. Like unacceptable behavior in the US may be normal or acceptable and not harmful in other countries. You have to have the correct assessment that abuse is about power and control and not about American norms. Unacceptable behavior in the US may be normal, acceptable, and not harmful, and inquire about how the client feels about the behaviors in question. Some cultural barriers for social interaction are dress. Muslim women who wear the hijab may attract negative attention and or discrimination. You have customs. Multiple differences in customs may lead to awkward interactions. You have gender relations. Some Muslim women do not shake hands. They'll avoid making eye contact or talking to members of the opposite sex. So there's something to keep in mind. There's a lack of knowledge and misinformation about the legal system. Like the abuser will oftentimes misinform victims about their rights under the US legal system. And if the abuser a lot of times will come from a country with widespread corruption and fears of police, courts, and government agencies, like Leslie was mentioning earlier, in home countries, police and judicial system may assist only those who have money or those that have influence. So immigrants who come here, it takes them a really long time to understand that the system here is not like that. And that takes, like Leslie said earlier, a lot of preparation from you guys for the immigrants. Women fear losing their status if the abuse is reported. Abusers will often threaten to report victims to immigration authorities. Some women have faced deportation, and many survivors do not want their husbands to be deported because there goes her means of financial support. Her kids might go with him, like he might take her kids and go. So there's a lot of issues, a lot of fears that women face, that women fear. There's also a lot of emotional barriers, the fear of losing children, believe that CPS will take the children if domestic violence is reported, fear that the abuser will kidnap the children, fear of children being abused. If the abuser can't abuse her, he might abuse her children. Fear of being ostracized, of being blamed within the Muslim community, as well as in her family, and fear of harm to her family, whether they're here or even back home. There are also other barriers are isolation, especially in suburban isolation. You can live in the suburbs and not go out of your house for a really long time, which is very different from back home where, like my mother-in-law lives in Egypt and she goes to the market twice a day. Right? She's old, but she goes down the stairs and goes out to the market twice a day to bring fresh vegetables. Right? So you see people, you see your neighbors walking on the street. Here in suburbia, it's not like that. You need a car to get anywhere. A lot of these women might not drive, and so they have that isolation, which doesn't help. Finances, they have no access to bank accounts, no work authorization to work legally here, no income. Also discrimination, like culturally sensitive services are not provided. They're often delayed or of poor quality. You get offensive comments or suggestions or non-verbal communication. And then they're also caught between two systems, like we were talking before, between Islamic versus US family law. Under Islamic law, a marriage contract can be verbal with 2 witnesses. That's all you need to do to form a marriage. Verbal contract and 2 witnesses and you're done. Of course, when you get married here, with most religious, like Nita was saying, the law of the land. So you have to have your paper, you have to register with the state, and most imams or Muslim ministers will do that. Divorce is complete after a 3-month waiting period, right? So after they decide on divorce, whether it's when he initiates divorce, it's you have a 3-month waiting period, and then that's it. The divorce is over. There's no going to a court. There's no system. There's no child support. Like he supports her during that period of time, and then that's it. Like he has a responsibility to his children, but it's not formalized like here. Polygamy again is allowed under certain conditions. Again, not here. And then under U.S. law, the marriage must be legalized through the court. Divorce can take 1 year. In Virginia, you have to have a year of separation before you can actually file for divorce. I don't know what it's like here in Indiana. I just moved here. I haven't practiced, so I don't know. In Missouri, it's not like that. You just have to not be pregnant, and you file within 90 days. You can ideally get your day in court as long as there's no large backlog. Only one wife is legal, of course, and other wives are not recognized by law or have limited rights. So these are just some of the issues that especially Muslim immigrants who come to you, these are some of the issues that they're facing, some of the issues that they're thinking about while they're talking to you. So in final comment is just to have patience. It might take them much longer to leave the situation because they have all these extra layers that they have to deal with before accepting that, okay, I have to leave, that's going to be the best thing for me. So just having patience and just being able to provide them with the services that are culturally competent, that do not offend her or that do not offend her culture, because that right there it'll just shut her off, and that'll be it. That'll be as far as you're going to get with her. That's all I had. We can, Faiza, questions?
Yeah, you mentioned the marriage contract earlier.
Yes.
Is that similar to the U.S. prenuptial?
It is. It is in a way.
And does it have as much, is it?
They have been enforced under U.S. law. So one of the things in Islamic law is under Islamic law, I get a dowry is what the term that they use here, but it's not a dowry. It is a marital gift to the wife. It's not to her dad. It's not to anyone else. She's not being, bought. It's a gift to me, right? And I can say I want, my marital gift to be $100,000. It has been enforced in U.S. courts in Maryland, in Virginia, in a couple other states. It has actually been enforced. So whether it's the mahar agreement or anything else in her marriage contract, but a lot of it comes down to informing these women that they can have a marriage contract, and that, of course, has to be done before they get married. So that's one of the things we're working on. Any other questions? Yes?
How does the religion deal with your view victims of sexual assault? Like, for instance, I have a case where a teenage girl was fondled by a family friend, and we have whole issues with the extended family, like everybody's all living together on full dance, and children.
Very hard of hearing, so I'm sorry.
We have issues like an extended family that are all living together, and they're all from Zimbabwe, and they, one of the family friends who's very close to them fondles one of the girls. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of sensing, because for some reason nobody wanted the father of the girl to know what happened to her, and the mother was pretending not to know, but it turned out she really did. So is there any kind of religious, anything in the Islam religion that's going to affect how they view what happened to her within the family, and how they will operate with prosecution?
Benita, do you want to? Benita actually does work like this, so she could probably give you a better definition. Under Islamic law, no, it's not allowed, but you have a lot of cultural...
Well, Lubabah just answered it. I mean, under Islamic law, no, that's an unacceptable interactions, unacceptable deviance. It's unacceptable, and it falls under this we talked about earlier in terms of how should families operate, and this is the antithesis of how a family operates. The challenge I think that you're getting to, and I'm sorry I didn't see where you were. Good, there you are back there. Okay, good. And I didn't. The challenge is what I'm hearing is that you ran up against what I would fall into cultural realm in terms of there may be power dynamics with the extended family of someone, maybe the older brother or considered the alpha of the family, and they must be protected above others in the family. There may be issues of if the wife is aware but doesn't want to tell the father, that she may fear violent repercussion on herself or her children. I mean, or even the perpetrator. You never know. And so there's a lot of other dynamics that are happening, but in terms of from a religious perspective, no, it's not acceptable at all. I think what the reality is that what's happening is that there are some probably familial dynamics and some cultural dynamics that are impeding optimal outcomes.
Like, how would I, as a prosecutor, make sure that I don't do something that's going to send them running from the justice system?
Well, I mean, it's a tricky thing in terms of, it would be, I guess in some cases like that, I treat it like I would treat anyone who's coming, sexual abuse is something that even in larger society, regardless of if we're talking Christian, if we're talking white, black, whatever, that is talked about in the most, in any family. And I haven't seen a sexual abuse case where there's of religiosity or religion, where there's a lot of willingness to really, when it gets funky like that, to really go forth, because you're talking about family, and so those bonds kick in odd ways when you're...
Just like this lady said, murder is not okay, wife beating, honor killing is not okay.
Oh, it's still not okay.
Sexual abuse is not okay.
Right, but you're asking me to tell her to... You want to convince her all the time that everything that she's operating under is completely wrong and and everything is wrong, and I'm not disagreeing with her. I agree with her choice. As advocates, you know you work with what you're working with, and so I've had abused women who I've been working with for a long time who go back, who take their children back, and you were not the one to have reached them, and it's frustrating and it's but there's no silver bullet. I think someone's just like there's no silver bullet that's going to just suddenly, make her see. You have to understand the impact of her child, or what's happening to her child, and that's the gamble. There's some women where I've engaged with and I said, look, this is how it is going to impact your child. Some stay. Sometimes that's the wake-up call they need, and others walk away. But at the end of the day, it's about helping that person understand, the person you need to work with, understand the impact to their child, and that is a bigger deal than protecting someone's dignity or presumed violence. And that's just a challenge that you have anywhere, across up against. I guess I don't have a great answer for you because I've been in that position too. And so you get through, and some women you don't get through. Too. Yeah.
I just want to comment on that. If I were presented with a situation where a child is sexually abused, as a professional, I go ahead and...
Well, yes, of course.
Situations like that, but domestic violence, when it comes to adults, it's a different story. But when it comes to children, they can't protect them.
Well, of course, I don't think that was your question, because we all know we're mandated reporters, so we're not, the suggestion is not to, well, whatever the case, if you're aware of abuse, you report abuse. It's not...
She's going to get in trouble.
I don't think that Ms. Fairley thinks that what happened to her is okay. Nobody's suggesting that, and they all seem kind of appropriate. I'm just thinking there's some dynamics going on that I don't understand. And I guess what I was wondering is, is there some sort of, because of what happened to her, is there some sort of shame about it? Is her value as a daughter decreased?
Yes.
Happened to her?
Yes.
And is that maybe why the father, you don't want the father to know, and why he's being...
You already have the answer. Yes. Your assessment is correct. But the action doesn't change in terms of either reporting or reaching or helping. If you have a reluctant parent to move forward, then you deal with that, but the shame issues and all of that's the same. And I have to say that I have found that dynamic regardless of religious background. That's why, that's just how a lot of those cases in my experience has just worked out, where there's shame involved, and that makes people, that's just one of the things you have to tackle. Yes.
Now, if shame is viewed upon the victim, how's the perpetrator viewed amongst the family or
Well, it depends on the family. Depends on the family, depends on the familial and cultural background of the family. To Lubabah's point, it could be that the mother is reluctant to tell the father because of violent repercussions onto the perpetrator. So there may be some problem solving that needs to be in that vein, and that's not uncommon either. You know, black vein of justice and all of that.
How's that viewed from religion?
What do you mean?
As far as a perpetrator committing such acts?
You cannot rape people in Islam. Can't do it. Can't do it. Yes.
I think maybe what's happening, I don't know, I don't know exactly, but it sounds to me what is the issue here is that maybe from a cultural perspective, this guy in maybe his culture thinks it's okay because women are less than or girls are less than, and so this particular person, not reflecting necessarily his religious views, but maybe his personal beliefs or something within the culture he grew up. Because I know in Africa there's been some real issues with men raping women because they just have that right. And so maybe he feels he has that right to do that to that child. And even though the father doesn't believe it, this man may believe it. And then mom's afraid that she's going to lose her husband because he's going to kill this guy.
Right.
And so, you know, it may not be religion, it may be a perverted person using
I would just continue to explore. I mean, these are one of those that's almost as difficult to give a general answer to. It's a very difficult to give a general answer to because there's so many, even in each of our responses, there's been so many assumptions made about what's really happening and what could be happening that I don't know if it's getting to even being helpful for you anymore. But it's it's like, okay, I got it. But, you know, keep exploring, asking those questions. I mean, again, it doesn't change the validity of anything that's happening, which you're not suggesting. It doesn't change that it still needs to be reported, which no one's saying it shouldn't be. So I think it's just more like really how do you help find out who, if it hinges on the mom, we got to find out what her challenges are and why she doesn't feel safe enough to either do something or say something. That to me, from what you've told me, seems to be the issue. If mom is pivotal in having knowledge and figuring out things, then we need to focus on what's going on with mom. Why does she feel not safe enough to do something for her daughter? What's happening? Is it the father? Is it the perpetrator? Is it a financial issue? What is it? So I would focus on trying to find out where the mom's at and just work through her issues. Yes.
Thinking about all of these things that we're talking about today, and that we've had so much interaction in this last speech, it's just so interesting how we all are trying, like you said, we're all assuming this, and we have certain ideas of what it could be. And I'm from South America. I was born and raised in Michigan, but my parents are from China and everything. So it's been really interesting to see it like from the outside, maybe a little bit like the way maybe how you have felt it as in your ways. I think it's what you were both saying earlier. It's kind of like it's the same. Everybody has the same. Every human being, I say mostly, on the basis, it's like to protect who we love, to protect our dignity, to protect our faith, who we're loyal to, etc. And in the end, it's just within, the differences are within and between the different people and cultures and religions. But this family, it could be so many different things, and add to that the differences of coming to a different country. You know, I consider myself pretty open to talk, and I don't, get really shy or whatever, but when you first come, wow, it's like really hard to adjust and to speak, especially if you're an adult who hasn't really spoken the language. So even though that parent might most likely know that it's not okay, even though it might happen in their world or in this world, there are so many other factors that are beyond really the culture or their attitude, rather. Their added to the culture or added to the religion. And it's just, I think in the end it's so hard to really get a specific answer from our families when there are issues that are so grave, serious, affecting them.
well that are different to adjust to, and it takes years to adjust to a different country. I think like your gut of trying to work with them and help them understand what is the best resolution and what is expected from them in this country, whether it's their laws or their beliefs or their whatever, it's the best way, because it's very hard to really connect unless, like, I know how long it takes to make a best friend, and we don't tell that person everything anyway.
Right, and that's all good. But I think that everyone's given some good, solid observations and suggestions, and just take it back and from, like I said, from what I'm hearing, from what you've said, it seems like that we really, to make mom as empowering her in some way is really the pivot. In the case that you've presented so far, that finding out what her issues are and then working that might seem to be the best way, as is usually the case. The mom is the key with these things. So, okay.
Okay, we are going to go ahead and close if there are no other questions. You have your evaluations. There's one for day one. Please fill it out and turn it in. If you do not and you want your CEU certificate, they're outside by registration. Tomorrow morning, our session, we have breakfast and networking from 8 to 10. The session will actually start at 10 o'clock, so you can come. We'd like you guys to come earlier and just network with each other and meet more people, but the session does not start until 10 o'clock. Thank you. Oh, one more small thing. I just wanted to thank Indiana Criminal Justice Institute for giving us the grant to put this together. This was all funded by them. I don't know if we have a representative in the room right now. We do, so please, round of applause. Thank you. Have a good night.
These gals definitely know their domestic violence work. That's very impressive. Take care.
Excuse me. She's just waiting on line. I just love her. Nice to meet you. Yeah, we saw what was the house. Yeah, you can talk a lot. Oh, we are? There's probably stuff in this. I'll walk over there and shoot there. Did you see you went to Knox College? I'm from Galesburg, Illinois. I've never been anybody from Galesburg, Illinois. I'm from outside of Illinois. Are you from around Galesburg or? No. So what made you interested in Knox? Okay, we have an answer. I don't know. I just came up on my I'm from Galesburg, where Knox College is. I've never. It's an awesome school. Up there,
My sister-in-law, Trish Mojo, works for the, isn't somebody? Yeah. Her name is Trish Mojo. But anyway, she still works for us. Yeah, I came to Anderson College, which is now Anderson University in Illinois, and I just didn't want to be here yet. Oh, I'm crocheting. I know, it relaxes you. Then you can keep my mind focused. People say it gives me from being distracted. I'm not doodling. I'm not doing anything. It's fun. Yeah. I actually I'm trying to sell some stuff. I'm getting ready for a show. I enjoyed it a lot. Yes, I just found out about this a couple weeks ago. Okay. Just showed up on my email.
Maureen, are you graduate? And are you School of Social Work graduate? Okay, because I sent a email blast out. I have a copy of it to Karen Jones with the alumni office.
Although you know my teacher would never print. I didn't even get as far as this thing that says this should print, and then they're flipping up the page. Oh, you here?
Yeah, I just thought it was such a great opportunity for our alumni.
Yeah, actually, I'm working again. I had to put my license down. I got a license for a while, so I'm not working, but I'm working back. So I'm so glad to. Yeah, it's a very good program. It's very, very nice. Thank you. Here, Mom. Was Carly Miller supposed to be here today?
She is speaking.